My sister sent me a voice note the morning my daughter went into the ICU. 43 seconds. She said, quote, "I heard Lily's in the hospital. Just so you know, Dad is devastated. This is really hard on the family. My daughter was 7 years old. She was on a ventilator. And somewhere across town, my father was the one being comforted. I took one photograph that night. Lily in the hospital bed, her small face half covered by the oxygen mask, her hand wrapped around my index finger, the way she had done since she was an hour old. I sent it to the family group chat. 14 people. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins who had watched her grow up in birthday photos and Christmas videos for 7 years. My father replied in under 3 minutes. Stop pretending she is our family. 9 words. I read them 4 times to make sure I had not misread them. Then I put the phone face down on the chair beside Lily's bed, and I did not pick it up again for 6 hours. I sat and I listened to the machines that were keeping my daughter breathing, and I thought about the word pretending, and what a man has to believe about a child to use it. I am going to tell you the whole story, not just the 9 words, because the 9 words were the end of something, not the beginning, and you need to understand what came before them to understand what I did after. Welcome to Secret Family Payback, the place where the people who kept quiet the longest finally speak. If you have ever sat in a hospital room and realized the people you most needed were the ones least likely to come, drop the word here in the comments. And subscribe, because what happens next in this story is the part nobody around me could explain, and I am still explaining it to myself. My name is Miriam Osei. I am 36 years old. I am a licensed civil engineer at a mid-sized infrastructure firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I build bridges for a living, which means I understand load distribution, stress points, and exactly what happens to a structure when the weight it was designed to carry shifts without warning. I have one daughter, Lily Grace Osei. She was born 7 years ago in October, small and loud and certain, and she has never once in 7 years been anything other than completely herself. She is the kind of child who names every spider she finds and then lets it outside. She asked me once if clouds feel lonely when they drift away from each other. She has never met a stranger, and she has never once let go of a hand she was holding without checking first that the person was going to be okay. She is my entire world. She has been my entire world since the moment she arrived in it. Her father, Marcus, and I separated when Lily was 2. It was not dramatic. It was quiet, the way some endings are. 2 people who cared about each other, discovering that caring was not the same as building a life together. We split without bitterness, and we raised Lily together. 2 houses, 1 child, shared calendars and school pickups, and no war between us. Marcus is a good man and a good father, and nothing in this story is about him. This story is about my father. His name is Joseph Osei. He is 61 years old. He came to the United States from Ghana in 1987 with 2 suitcases and a degree in electrical engineering that this country refused to recognize for 11 years. He drove a taxi. He worked factory night shifts. He put himself back through school at 40 and retired as a senior electrical engineer at a utilities company in Concord. He is the hardest working person I have ever known in my life. He is also a man who decided, when I was 28 years old and newly pregnant and unmarried, that I had committed an act of personal betrayal against the family name. I want to be precise about what that looked like, because the precision matters. He did not shout. He did not slam doors. He called me into the kitchen of the house I grew up in, and he sat across the table from me, and he told me in a level voice that what I had done was a disgrace, that I had chosen pleasure over principle, that the child, his word, the child, would be a reminder of that choice. That he would not pretend otherwise. I was 28. I had a master's degree, a job I had worked for 6 years to earn, and a daughter growing inside me who had not chosen any of this. I sat in that kitchen, and I told my father that I was keeping her, and that I hoped he would come to know her, and that I was sorry he was hurting. He did not respond. He got up and put his coffee cup in the sink. That was the first time. What followed over the next 7 years was not cruelty exactly. It was more like a policy. My father attended family events. He sat at the same table as Lily at Christmas and Easter, and the occasional Sunday dinner. He was not rude to her face. He did not speak to her unless she spoke to him, and when she did, he answered in brief sentences with the warmth of someone answering a coworker they did not know well. He gave her a card on her birthdays, plain, unsigned inside, left on the counter rather than handed to her directly. My mother, Adwoa, moved around this policy like a woman who had been navigating a particular piece of furniture in the dark for so long she no longer noticed it. She loved Lily in the full and uncomplicated way that some grandmothers carry as a biological fact. She would have burned the house down for that child. But she did not challenge my father. She had been married to him for 38 years, and she had learned the geography of him the way you learn a neighborhood, knowing which streets to avoid. My sister Abena is 33, and she operates the way water does, taking the shape of whatever container she is in. When my father was warm, she was warm. When he was cold, she found reasons to call less. She is not a bad person. She is a person who learned early that it is easier to agree with the loudest voice in the room than to find her own. For 7 years, I built my life around this arrangement. I engineered around the stress points, the way I engineer around unstable soil. I brought Lily to family events, and I watched her be charming and funny, and completely unbothered by a grandfather who barely spoke to her. Because she was 7, and she had not yet learned to read the thing behind the thing. I told myself it was manageable. I told myself she did not notice. I told myself it would shift when she got older, when she proved herself somehow, when my father found his way to her the way some people find their way to things late and quietly, and without admitting they were ever lost. I was wrong. But I did not find out how wrong until a Tuesday night in March when Lily could not catch her breath. She had been tired for 3 weeks. Not sick tired, not fever tired, just the quiet fatigue of a child who runs out of energy earlier than she should. I had taken her to the pediatrician twice. Virus, they said both times, rest and fluids. And I had believed them because I am an engineer, not a doctor, and I did not know yet what I would learn to recognize. On the Tuesday, she woke up at 2 in the morning, making a sound I had never heard come out of a human being. A thin, high, effortful sound. Each breath a project. I called 911, and I sat on the floor of her bedroom with her in my lap, and I talked to her in the steady voice I use when I need someone to trust me, and I counted her breaths, and I did not let myself feel what I was feeling, because she needed me to be the floor and not the ceiling. The paramedics came in 4 minutes. The longest 4 minutes of my life up to that point. I did not know yet that longer ones were coming. In the emergency room, they moved fast in the particular way that tells you the situation is serious, even when no one says the words out loud. A pediatric cardiologist came in within the hour. Dr. Priya Nair, small and precise and absolutely calm in the way of someone who has learned to save that emotion for later. She closed the exam room door with a softness I felt in my spine. Lily had myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle, likely triggered by a virus that had seemed ordinary and had not been. Her heart was under strain. They were going to admit her to the PICU. She was going to need monitoring and treatment and time, and we would know more in the next 24 to 48 hours, and they were going to take very good care of her. She said the last sentence looking directly at me, and I understood that it was meant to be load-bearing. They moved us to the pediatric intensive care unit at 4 in the morning. By 5, Lily was on oxygen. By 6, they had added the ventilator because her body was working too hard to breathe on its own, and they needed to give her heart less to do. I watched them place it with my hands flat on my thighs and my jaw locked and something behind my sternum that had no name in any language. My mother arrived at 7:30 with a bag of food I could not eat and sat beside me and held my hand and did not say anything that was not useful. She is built for crisis in the way that some people are. She becomes very quiet and very present, and she does not leave. I called my father at 8. He answered on the second ring. I told him what had happened. I told him where we were. I told him what the doctors had said. I told him Lily was stable but serious, and that we were in the PICU and that any family who wanted to come could come. There was a pause on the line, the kind that has weight. He said he would speak to Abena. That was the last I heard from him for 11 hours. I want to stop here and tell you something about the PICU, for those who have never had reason to know it. It is a room designed for the work of keeping children alive, and it does that work with extraordinary competence, and it is one of the loneliest places a human being can stand. The sounds are specific. The light does not change with the time of day. There are no windows in the section we were in. You lose track of hours the way you lose track of depth underwater, by feel rather than measurement. I sat in a chair beside Lily's bed and I talked to her even though the sedation meant she could not hear me, because the nurses told me that some part of her might, and because I needed to hear my own voice saying the things I was saying. I told her about the bridge project I was working on. I told her about the spider she had named Gerald, who was still living in the corner of the kitchen window because I had not had the heart to move him. I told her about the book we were halfway through at bedtime and what I thought was going to happen next. And I told her I would be there when she woke up and that I was not going anywhere and that she was doing so well. At 11 that morning, a nurse named Diana, who had the quiet efficiency of someone who has seen everything and retained her humanity anyway, brought me a coffee I had not asked for and sat with me for 4 minutes exactly, because that was what she had, and asked me if there was anything she could do. I told her she was already doing it. She is still on my phone contacts. I have texted her twice since this happened, both times just to say Lily is okay. At 6 in the evening, Lily's numbers improved enough that Dr. Nair came in with something approaching optimism in her face. Guarded, she said that word twice, but movement in the right direction. Her heart was responding. They would reassess the ventilator in 12 hours. She used the word hopeful, and I held on to it like a rope. At 7:15, I took out my phone to update the family group chat. I had not looked at it since that morning. I had 14 unread messages and I scrolled through them quickly, logging who had written, cousins sending prayers, an aunt I rarely spoke to, Marcus texting separately to say he was at the hospital entrance and did I need him to come up. I texted Marcus yes, and then I took the photograph. Lily in the bed, the ventilator, the monitors, her hand with my finger in it, small and warm. I took it because I needed people to understand what I was asking them to understand. I needed the image to carry what I could not write in words. I typed, "She is stable, but still very serious. This is what our girl looks like tonight. If you can come, we are in the PICU, room 4. She will know you were here." I sent it. My father replied in under 3 minutes. "Stop pretending she is our family." I read it 4 times. Then I looked at my daughter. Then I looked at the message again. Then I set the phone face down, and I sat in that chair for a long time. Marcus arrived at 7:45 and found me sitting in the dark beside the machines. He did not ask what had happened, because he could see it in me. He sat in the other chair, and he did not speak, and that was the right thing to do. At 8:30, I picked up my phone. I read every message in the thread. 11 people had seen my father's reply. 2 cousins had sent prayer hands after it. Whether they had read it or not, I could not say, but the sequence of it was its own sentence. Not one person had responded to what he wrote. Not one person had written anything that acknowledged it. My sister had typed, "Sending so much love, Miri," at 7:18, before my father's message. She had not written anything after. I typed a reply to the group. I said, "Thank you everyone, we are holding on." Then I opened a new note on my phone. A habit from work, from the years of field documentation and project logs, and I typed the exact words my father had written, the time, the date, and the number of people in the chat who had seen them. I titled the note simply, "Record." It was an engineering habit. You document site conditions at the moment of observation, because memory shifts and details blur, and the truth of a thing is most accurate when you write it down before you have had time to process it. I did not know yet what I was going to build with the record. I just knew I needed one. If you have ever been in a waiting room and understood in a specific, terrible way that your family's silence was its own kind of answer, type the word "waiting" in the comments. I read every one. And subscribe, because the next part of this story is where I stopped being afraid. Lily came off the ventilator at 11 the following morning. I was there. I watched Dr. Nair give the instruction. And I watched the team work. And then I watched my daughter take a breath on her own, and then another one, and the sound it made was the best sound I have ever heard in my life. She slept most of that day. The following morning, she opened her eyes and looked at me and said, her voice rough and small, "Mom, you look terrible. She is 7 years old and I am telling you she is going to be fine." She was in the PICU for 6 days total. Then a step-down unit for 3 more. Then home, with medication and a follow-up schedule and a small gray folder of discharge instructions that I read 4 times that night and have memorized in the way that only parents of children who have been sick learn to memorize things. She asked me twice during those 9 days if Grandpa Joseph came. I told her he had been very worried from home. She accepted this with the generosity of a child who gives people the benefit of interpretation. She said, "Tell him I am okay. Tell him the doctors said my heart is getting stronger." I sat with that request for a long time. Then I went back to the note on my phone, the one I had titled "Record," and I started adding to it. The day we came home, I sent my father a text message. I wrote, Lily is home, she is recovering. She asked me to tell you that the doctors said her heart is getting stronger. She wanted you to know. He did not respond. I gave him 3 days. Then I called. He answered. I told him I needed to speak with him in person. He said he was available Saturday. I said I would come at 10. I want to be honest with you about Saturday morning, because the honest version is the point. I sat in my car outside my childhood home for 11 minutes before going in. I was not afraid exactly, or not only afraid. I was doing something more like structural assessment, the kind I do on a bridge before I recommend load changes. I was calculating whether what I was about to do would hold. I had brought nothing with me except the note on my phone and 36 years of being Joseph Osei's daughter and knowing exactly which rooms had exits. My mother let me in. My father was in the sitting room with the television on low. He turned it off when I came in. My sister was not there. My mother sat in the chair in the corner and did not leave, which I had not expected and which changed something in me. I sat across from my father and I told him what I was about to say before I said it, because that is how I have learned to build things that do not collapse. I said, I am going to tell you what has happened and what I need from you going forward. I am not here to argue. I am here to be clear. He said nothing. He looked at me the way he has looked at me since I was 28, the look that is not quite disappointment and not quite anger and is somehow worse than either. I told him that his granddaughter had been in the intensive care unit on a ventilator for 2 days, and that he had not come and had not called and had sent one message in response to a photograph of her connected to machines. I told him I had that message documented and that I wanted him to understand I had it. I told him I was not saying this as a threat. I was saying it as a fact, the way I report site conditions, because it was true and it had happened, and I was not going to allow it to be revised later by anyone including him. I told him that Lily was 7 years old and that she had done nothing, not one single thing, to earn what he had given her for the past 7 years. That the circumstances of her birth were mine, not hers. That if he had a grievance with the choices I had made at 28, he could have that grievance with me. He did not get to carry it in his face every time he sat at the same table as my daughter. I told him that I had given him 7 years to find his way to her, because I believed in the possibility of people becoming different versions of themselves, and because she loved him in the open, uncomplicated way she loved everything, and because I had hoped. And then I told him what was going to change. I said, she will not be at family events where you are present unless I have heard from you that something is different. Not because I want to punish you, because I am not going to put her in a room with someone who has called her pretend. She is not pretend. She is the most real thing I have ever made, and I will not ask her to earn her place at a table she was born with a seat at. My father sat in that chair and I watched something move across his face that I had not seen there before. Not softening exactly. Something more like the look of a structure realizing it has been assessed. My mother made a sound in the corner. Not words, just a sound. My father said, after a very long silence, "You have always been too sensitive." I said, "I know you believe that. I also know what you wrote." I stood up. I told him I loved him, because I do, in the complicated way you love someone who has cost you something. And I told him that Lily had asked me to tell him her heart was getting stronger. I left the message there on his kitchen table like a test I was not administering. I drove home and I sat in my car again, and I called Marcus, and I told him everything, and I cried in a way I had not cried since the PICU, the kind of crying that is not sad exactly, but is the sound that comes out when you have been holding something structurally necessary for a very long time and finally set it down. Then I went inside and made lunch, and Lily told me a very long story about Gerald the spider, which apparently had a girlfriend now called Geraldine, and I listened to every word. 3 weeks went by, then a month. My father did not call. My sister texted once to say she hoped I was well, a text so carefully worded it could have been sent to anyone, and I replied that we were well and thanked her and did not push further. My mother called every 3rd day. She did not discuss my father. She asked about Lily in the specific and detailed way that meant she was paying very close attention. She asked what Lily was eating, how her sleep was, whether she had started drawing again, because Lily draws constantly, and my mother had noticed she had stopped during the hospital stay, and she wanted to know when it came back. It came back on a Thursday in April, a drawing of a house with a very large spider in the window, and I sent my mother a photograph, and she sent back the kind of response that needs no translation in any language. The follow-up cardiology appointments were every 2 weeks at first, then monthly. Dr. Nair is meticulous and warm, and she explains everything twice in 2 different ways, and I trust her in the particular way you trust someone who has demonstrated their competence in a situation where the stakes were the highest stakes. Lily's heart function was improving. The inflammation was resolving. The word Dr. Nair used at the 6-week appointment was encouraging. At the 3-month appointment, she used the word excellent, and I had to excuse myself to the hallway for 2 minutes. The family group chat had gone quiet after the night in the PQ. A cousin had posted a birthday greeting for someone else, and a few people had responded, but the thing that my father had written sat in the thread like a stone in still water. Not mentioned, not addressed, visible to anyone who scrolled. I did not remove myself from the chat. I made that choice deliberately. I stayed because I wanted the record to stay visible, not as a weapon, as a fact. 6 weeks after the Saturday conversation, my father called me. I was in the car on the way home from work. I pulled over. He spoke for 3 minutes, and I did not interrupt him. He said that he had been speaking with someone from his church, a pastor he has known for 20 years, and that this man had said something to him that had been, his word, instructive. He did not tell me what the pastor had said. He said that he had not handled things well. He said that he understood Lily was a child who had not deserved. He stopped there. He did not finish the sentence. I waited. He said, "I would like to see her, if that is something you would allow." I sat in my car on the side of a road in Charlotte, and I thought about everything I had spent 8 years building around the absence of that sentence. I told him I would speak to Lily. That is the thing nobody tells you about being a parent. When the person who hurt you is asking to re-enter, you do not get to make the decision for the feeling it gives you. You have to make it for the smaller person who is drawing spiders in the kitchen window and who has 2 years of questions stored up about a grandfather who barely looked at her, and you have to make it with their heart in your hand, not your own. I spoke to Lily that evening after dinner. I told her that Grandpa Joseph had called and that he wanted to see her and that it was her choice. She was quiet for a moment, in the way she is quiet when she is deciding something real. She said, "Does he know I am better?" I said, "I told him." She said, "Okay, but only if Grandma Adwoa comes too. She is 7 years old." She negotiated terms. The first visit was a Sunday in May. My parents came to my house. My mother brought jollof rice, and Lily showed her Gerald and Geraldine immediately and at great length. My father sat in the chair in my living room, and Lily brought him a drawing she had made. She had drawn our family, the way children draw families, everyone the same height, everyone with the same round head. She had included him. She handed it to him without ceremony and went back to showing my mother the spiders. My father held that drawing for a very long time. He did not cry. He is not a man who cries. But he held it in both hands, and he looked at it the way you look at something you cannot believe was left for you after what you did. He comes on Sundays now. Not every Sunday, but most. He and Lily are still learning each other in the careful way that people learn each other when there is ground to make up. He asked her once what she wanted to be when she grew up. She told him an engineer, like you, or a spider scientist. She was undecided. He laughed. It was the first time I had heard him laugh in that house in a very long time. My mother looked at me across the room when he laughed, and what was in her face was not surprise. It was relief. The specific relief of a woman who has been waiting for something for 8 years and has finally, improbably, watched it arrive. I have not forgiven my father in the way that word is sometimes used, as if forgiveness is a door you open once and walk through into a cleared room. It is more like a bridge I am still building, one section at a time, checking the load calculations as I go. There are things he said that I carry, not as wounds exactly, but as measurements. I know the weight of them. I know which parts of the structure they affect. I build accordingly. What I know is that my daughter is not pretend. She never was. She is the most solidly, completely, undeniably real person I have ever had the honor of knowing, and she came into a family that did not fully welcome her, and she named the spiders on her way in, and she negotiated terms before she agreed to give her grandfather a second chance, and she drew him into the family picture before he had earned it, and she handed it to him without making him ask. She is 7 years old, she is my entire world, and her heart is getting stronger. If this story found you on a day you needed it, put the word stronger in the comments. And if someone you know is raising a child alone, and doing it well, and doing it quietly, share this with them. They need to hear it said out loud. Subscribe to Secret Family Payback. I will see you in the next one.